Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I'm Joel.
And I'm Ryan. Did I catch you smiling there when the song started ending?
No, I couldn't. I have no idea.
You were wiggling around and smiling. I don't know. I know it's been a long day. And it's nice to hook up with you for the podcast. But
Yep. It's been a bit of a.
The song helps, doesn't it? I mean, it helps.
Yeah.
When you're like, just like something about it. It's like, hey, there they are.
Well,
ushering in another Movie Show with Joel and Ryan episode.
Yeah.
Almost 200 of them.
Almost. Yeah. In fact, I gotta get on that and line up whatever I'm gonna do for that. Whatever I'm gonna want to surprise Ryan with.
If you can't get anybody to come, because I would understand at this point, maybe you could just do sock puppets of them or something. I could just interact with those.
Yeah, that would be a sock puppet Ryan and a sock puppet Joel.
I have a sock puppet. I don't want to say who it's based on, but she's got red hair and pigtails, and she gets the names of movies wrong. And every once in a while she likes to do movie reviews, and sometimes she'll sing a song about them. She's going to be a very special guest. Probably not until sometime after the 200th episode, because I can't make a sock puppet, so I got my buddy working on it. Bring her back to life, because
awesome. I love that. And
it should be fun. We'll see. You'll have to break out something, the piano or the keyboard or something, because you have to play the accompaniment every once in a while. There's not a song every time, but every once in a while. But it's really easy. The accompaniment's the same every time. It should be no problem for a man of your skills to accomplish.
Awesome. Hey everybody. So was last week's show nerdy enough for you? Because I sure, we know who we are.
Yeah.
We know our role. We know, and it was to me it was wonderfully nerdy. I'm always fascinated by. I don't think I said this on the air. I think it was after we were done, where I was saying, how a director composes the visual element of the story is always fascinating, and how that has evolved over the years. I find fascinating. So,
well, and I don't know if I said it. I might have said it on the air. I think I did, but I always say, the part of cinematography I don't really understand. I have some understanding of it, but the part that is magical to me is lighting. Mm-hmm. And there's very few things as important to the process as that. And yet it's something that we can't wrap our brains around. We know what blue is, but what is blue with light shooting through it? It's a whole different thing. And it affects things totally differently. So that to me is always mysterious, but I always feel like, lining up the people, composition and angles and stuff like that stuff I really get into. So when you talk about the shape of movies, it's fun. And just, I got to say, like I said last week, just going through screen grabs of Ghostbusters to find the shingle for the show was super fun, because you just see how even something like that, like how much artfulness went into its making and stuff. Yeah. It's really neat to be reminded of that, because less and less movies these days sort of do remind me of that. They when they say they don't make them like they used to, they really mean that. They don't make. I just say they don't make movies like Ghostbusters like they used to,
right?
Because they still make really art films that are really gorgeous and that are visually splendiferous. And every once in a while, one of those peeks into the mainstream or a big budgeted movie is still done that way, but it's very unusual. And if that's not to say, that's not to say, oh, this such and such superhero movie or whatever, this Mission Impossible movie like aren't hard to make. That's couldn't be further from the truth. There's a lot obviously that goes into that, but simply painting the picture is it's not a lost art, but it's a bit of a losing. It's a part of the art that we're losing slowly because, like I said, because people just like I can follow this. I don't care if the sides are chopped off. I mean, I don't care if whatever. That's an important part of it, but being able to follow it. But it's not ultimately what makes things special. Just narrative. That's not enough. It's a visual medium. There's a lot other things going. Things in the toolkit. Big one that we didn't talk about in our production meeting episode way back when. We're talking about tonight.
Right. Yeah. We're gonna get into a subject that Ryan and I know intimately, but also is also can be incredibly frustrating. It can be maddening, and I do think maddening is different than frustrating. Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about acting. Brilliant. Yes, we are going to tackle what it means to act for the camera, acting for film, acting. What makes acting good? Why is acting good? What do the actors do to make the good? What are the kinds of things that they're doing? So it's going to be, we're going to, and you may get a little insight as to how Ryan and I, in our illustrious careers as performers, how we have approached characters, and the answer might surprise you. So we're calling this one The Acting Show.
I'm a big actor. Look at the great big actor on the stage. I yell the loudest. Look at me.
That's from one of my favorite sketches on Mr. Show, where Bob and David were Bob Odenkirk, David Cross, they're like trying to pay tribute to their guidance counselor, Mr. Phelps, and how he helped make them who they are. And they're like, we're actors now. And he's like, well, good. I hope that that leads to something. And they're like, well, we have our own show. You're on TV now. It's like, well, that's good. That makes for a fun hobby. And they're just like, God. And then they're like, and he's like, oh, acting, and they're like, we work really hard. And he's like, no, you don't. Acting is easy. That's basically just who can yell the loudest. And, then it just everyone. Yeah. And
there's a great behind the scenes story of his first season of Fargo that Bob Odenkirk tells about how he's just sitting around waiting for a setup or something, and Martin was basically
Freeman.
Starring.
Yeah, Martin Freeman.
Yeah, he's hanging out there, and Bob, hadn't been, or I guess he had been on Breaking Bad by this point, but he had just been on it, and it had mostly been in sitcoms and obviously very famously improv shows and sketch comedy, which he's incredibly dynamite. But he said, it's just different. He goes, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was sort of awkward silence. I don't know. So, in comedy, what we do is we're like, hey, what if you did this? And what if I do that? And then what if we tried this? And what if you're thinking this? And blah, 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 blah. Like it's all, let's try that. Mm-hmm. Let's do this. And he kind of tried that. And Freeman just heard, sat there, herded him out. And then when the silence came back to the situation, he said, don't ever, and walked away.
Yep.
So we'll talk about. There's a lot of different approaches.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find them out the hard way. as
yeah, and that's kind of the structure of the shows. We'll talk. We'll talk. There's basically there's a million different nuances to this stuff, but there's kind of 5 major sort of techniques in acting.
Well, and we just said that it's some people are really, really good at acting and they don't even know what they're doing. So there really are, like, what your approach to it is Joel said at the beginning while we were talking before the show, it's completely subjective, and it's really is super individual. It's still though fun to evaluate different schools of acting and we'll try and give some examples of them, but you really can't, even with people who really are, who themselves will say openly that they're hardcore into this kind of thing or that kind of thing. It's such a personal thing that that every single thing it's different. It's totally what you and your personality and what the inner workings of you sort of bring to it. And that's fun to think about it.
Yeah. And and also, as we talk about in our behind the scenes in our production meeting episode, that's also part of the element that sometimes is forgotten, though, is that as an actor, you can go through all of these things that we're going to talk about, and if you it may make you might give you tremendous insight on creating a character, and you might create the greatest character that anyone has ever put on celluloid. But if you're but it's a collaborative art form, and if you're an asshole, that is going to, there were times where it was okay to be an asshole, and you still sort of got away with it if you were a good enough actor. And those there are less and less people that people are, you need to have. So if you are one of these in some of the methods that we're going to talk about, if you're someone who gives yourself over to the role and, I become this person for the entire time, if that makes you a dick, that is something that is going to come back, and it certainly nowadays is something that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. So, I only say that to say, if you are an aspiring actor and for some reason you stumbled upon the movie show Joel and Ryan's acting episode here, or if you were one of my former students that I used to teach acting, I was like, keep your crap together. Just keep your shit together when you're off stage or off camera too. It's not always about the art, actually. Well, and we'll get that. We can get to that at some later. There's a great Melissa McCarthy story that she told that it's been tumbling around in my head pretty much since I saw it almost a week ago or whatever. So anyway, acting. That's the most visual element. Yeah, go ahead.
The arts are collaborative, and the other thing is you can do all that difficult emotional engineering and all that stuff and come up with something great, and you're still at the mercy of all this other things and this other departments and the editing, which take they use and how you look in it, and certainly the writing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Ryan. How many times have you done a take on camera, or you've been on stage and you're like, I nailed that one. That's the one I nailed. And then you either watch the final cut or you go into a note session after a stage production, and they're like, oh, that's not the take they used. Yeah. Why didn't you? The one that I totally felt it, or you'll get a note of if it's a stage performance, you're like, yeah, that was. Can you bring that? That was, and they give you a note on it of to change it. And you're like, we're not always the best judge of what we're doing, and maybe that's why we only achieve the levels that we achieve. And
I had a good actor too, a friend of mine. It was when they were going through grad school. They said, they were sort of eager to please and sort of take every note. And their one of their professors, their advisors, by the end of the program said, "You don't have to take every note. Sometimes you just sit there, politely nod, and do what you want." I mean, I don't want to send you out in the world thinking that you are not ultimately in charge of your own performance. And I feel like I'm safe saying that to you, because everything that I've ever seen I've seen the effort to try and get whatever you were told up there. And I've seen it, it work wonders, but I've also seen it sort of derail whatever your process is. And it's sometimes the people giving the notes, sometimes even the people in charge aren't necessarily right about something. That's part of what's weird about it. It's a really, really weird, any creative endeavor, which I think most people have had some kind of one, like where does that where does the inspiration come from and stuff. And you know, it's one of the most subjective things there is, truly. It's so
right.
We
And
just say that off the top and then just understand that as we go through this.
Yep. All right. So we talked about a little bit about the stage, and obviously that is where, especially in the early days of film, and you know, once we got into early days of film, that silent movie acting was stage acting, and so the big broad gestures, the overwrought facial expressions, that worked because it was silent. It was the picture was king on all of that, and you needed to have that largesse, that largeness of performance was necessary.
I'm not 100% sure that it was. But,
well, I should maybe not. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say necessary. It was sort of just the given, the known. That was the known. That big
demonstration really did fill in where the words would be to a lot of degree, and so to keep the clarity going, even though you're reading stuff in between each little section of films.
Yeah, and it's like
I watch a lot of silent films. We've watched a few lately, and it's interesting watching that, man. It's interesting watching the Douglas Fairbankses and the Ivor Novellos, doing their thing with their massive eye makeup.
Yeah.
So much eye makeup, Joel. Anyway, I don't think that has to do with acting technique, but I just
but
back in those days, holy smokes. And so it's interesting, but it's not necessarily, movie actors of that era. A few of them from the stage, but a lot of the best stage actors really looked down on film and really didn't get involved in it. Like in the way you'd have thought there'd be a sort of natural migration to it. It was really considered a lower art form and stuff. And it really was these guys. It wasn't so much the guys from the big shows or whatever at the turn of the century. It was the guys from vaudeville and the guys that were really visually dominated in what they were able to communicate that made the stuff work. And that's why those best early silent films are, with a Buster Keaton film.
Yeah, and Harold Lloyd, and so so you look back at and that stagey sort of very presentational type of acting, that still gave us some great performances. All About Eve, Betty Davis. Betty Davis, that was still just like, I'm showing up, I'm saying the words, I'm Betty Davis. I know who this person is, and that's I'm just
right up till the early 80s. She just kept doing it the same way. And Betty Davis is a good actor. It's true.
Yeah. And so, Richard Burton is another one, and that sort of that larger than life sort of style of acting. That
you think Richard Burton's larger than life?
No, I was going on to the people who are larger than life. That style of acting, like William Shatner, like we sort of make fun of William Shatner, but that came from stage.
William Shatner's a fun one. I go back and watch. I mean, I was watching. Well, if you really want to see him at his best, go watch Judgment at Nuremberg. He's fantastic in that movie, and he's acting opposite almost exclusively Spencer Tracy, who he worshipped. And that doesn't come through the performance, but his effort, to be good in a good movie is there. And I was watching last night not a very celebrated Star Trek, the original series episode, where these plants make you really happy and just make you want to just hang out and not do anything. They spit confetti at you, which they call spores, and they make you happy. Maybe some of you are spots.
I wonder what they were referencing. Wonder what they were referencing in that episode.
I don't know, but there's this great scene where it's like the only way to break the spell of the spores and get back your personal autonomy is with really large and primarily negative emotions. That makes the spores that are in you die, essentially, and then you can control your own behavior and whatever. And so he figures that out, our beloved Captain Kirk, and he's got to, first guy he's got to get back on his team is Spock, who's gotten totally off the deep end. And And so he does it by insulting him into a fist fight, which is really hard. It takes a long time, a comically long time to get Spock mad at him when it would anyway, but under the influence of the spores, and because he just kind of wants to explain things and, just it isn't that kind of dude. It takes a long time, but then once it happens, it's over. He's throwing them around the room and stuff like this. And they're like, well, and then he finally figures it out. He's about to smash the whatever thing on him, and he's oh, you knew this would cure me or whatever. And so this is all a long ways to say it's because it's so stupid. But they get to the end of it and the end of the scene, and because I forget, because Shatner's he's such a big personality, and even in his prime, he was such a quirky, fun guy. The way he would do stuff, so you forget that with that leading man, good looks, and all that stuff that he had, that what brought him down to earth, strangely, the confidence in himself. And you feel that every time he does something natural or normal or that feels really truthful, it comes from that place of, I'm pretty good at this. And so here, him and Nimoy, great acting team, if there ever was one, and they're on there, and Nimoy says, sir, it's illegal, it's a court-martial offense to strike another officer or whatever. He's like that. He goes, that's true, but without the two of us, we won't be able to get this machine going that will free everybody of the spores, will we? And Spock, of course, says, yep, that's logical. And Shat does this, he goes, and turns around and heads out the door. And that's a little silly, it's so lived in and natural and wonderful. And so I don't know why I'm telling William Shatner stories or playing out entire scenes for you here on the show. That's something we actually try not to do, but I felt like it needed some context. But it's not the whole thing is whatever. The combat, Star Trek combat is the funnest thing ever. What it is that it's where it's even in this really silly moment at the end of it, even when he's got to do this wordless tag, he found the truth in that moment. That was really, really, it's where this sort of era, about halfway through the first season where you really start to see these guys start to get it and get the relationships. When Spock says, oh, you win the argument because you're the more logical, what do you, exactly, it's fun. So even as demonstrative as he is, and I think his later, he gets more and more cartoony as he ages. And I really do think it's fun, but I do think it comes from insecurity. I think you can't go back and you can't get your hair back and you can't get skinny and you can't do any of those things and you can't be that sort of rock star anymore. So you just keep piling it on. And I think he's a perfect, because he's a good actor, even as an older guy, he really is good, but he's a case study in how that confidence, just that confidence to throw it out there is really it's a superpower that you can't teach in acting.
So we could do a whole show on William Shatner stories and just the Shat.
We could do it. We could do it because he is really delightful to watch through the years, and even when he's silly and stuff that. And even in one of the not so good Star Trek movies, that scene where the Klingons killed David on the planet, and they inform him, and he steps back and trips on his chair. Okay, that's metaphorically weighty in a lot of ways. It's thematically on the nose, and yet he does it in this way that's really, really good. So you could talk about Shatner and where, when he's got to deliver the big moment, he pretty much does that. And when he knows he's just a clown, he's the most fun, goofiest clown to be around,
So it was the Russians. It was the Russians that changed everything. I think it was I want to say the 20s. It might have been the 30s, but I think it was the 20s when the Russian National Theater came and toured through the United States, toured through New York, toured through, I don't know if they went to LA or not, but they certainly were in New York. And the way they taught, Stanislavski and the way the Russian National Theater, the way they approached character kind of blew everyone's minds. And And basically, in class, what we're calling classical acting, but it's essentially like, let's talk about Bette Davis. So she's like, for her, it's like, okay, I come in here, we have an argument, and I storm out and I close and I slam the door behind me. So, all right, let's give that a go. Let's put it on its feet and let's figure it out. The Russian, the Stanislavski would turn around and go, but why? Why are you coming in to argue? And why is all of this happening? And why are you slamming the door when you leave? And really making you, this is where we get the classic, what is my motivation? That trope of like, yes, but what is my motivation for eating this peach? Yeah.
It's been parodied often throughout. It's the very, if you want to make an actor on a sitcom or something be particularly douchey, then they would be, ooh, what's my motivation? Or actor who lost his motivation. But
opening of Tootsie, where Dustin Hoffman's character is just, and they're like, well, I need you back in that chair. He's like, but I'm here and I'm dying. And they're like, yes, but can you die back in that chair? He's like,
I'm sorry, love, but you just have to do it.
Yeah.
The director says, I know it's awkward, but the left side of the house can see you tall. He says, I know that whole scene by heart.
But
here's a guy who's really professional and full of integrity, still a bit of an asshole, but it just can't. And we've all been there. I've certainly been there, which is like what you're saying. Like, I don't think I've ever been told to do something as stupid as that. But sometimes you get everything you've done up to this point. You're like building blocks on things, and somebody tells you to do something that you feel just knocks them all down and says, forget what you've been doing for 2 weeks, do this. And you just hit the brakes and can't go on. Maybe you find a way, or maybe you find a way to rectify things back together. But so, yeah, he won't do it, loses the job, goes down in flames, but for the right reasons. Yay.
So, the idea of asking why, the idea of internalizing the character and not just playing the given circumstances. That's something what we should talk about a little bit. The given circumstances of, I think in classic acting, that's kind of where it was like, okay, here's what's happening. Great, let's do it. This is
what I'm doing. If you bought Bela Lugosi's book on acting, it's literally just a bunch of headshots of him showing you what different emotions look like and telling you to practice them, repeat them, and then ultimately, at least when you get to the end, make them your own.
Right.
This is what angry looks like. I mean, it's literally that's what it's telling you. And now somebody's asking a question, what motivates you to do this? And I really do believe that as silly as it may sound, or as big a joke as we might make out of it, all modern acting is goal-oriented. And the engine that drives almost every decent performance that you've ever seen is driven by, is run by and fueled by why. And that starts with desire. It starts with, what do you want? What are you trying to get out of this? Because if you think about your life, and acting isn't like living exactly, it's make-believe, of course, but it's what you want out of every situation that you walk into. That is the thing that keeps you putting along, and that motivates you to sort of act and do and choose the different tactics that you do to basically to get the things you want. It doesn't mean you're some super selfish person. Some people want what's best for everybody, and I mean and some people want more for others than they even want for themselves. But what you want, what you're trying to accomplish, if you just look bad or play sad without the why, feels demonstrative and it feels empty. And once the camera got quieter and it got tighter on your face, and your performances had to get more real to accommodate that, that was the most necessary tool. I can't tell you. And that's a lot of people know that instinctively. You don't necessarily have to know it to be a decent actor. You just you just still have to have it be happening in there somehow. That I really believe it has to be part of it.
Right. And once directors
no offense to Bella. Thanks for the memories, man. You're awesome.
Nope. But yeah, well, I mean,
a little presentational for my tastes is all I'm saying.
Well, and that is a particular acting, style into itself. But it, once you ask once a director, luckily it kind of all, it all fed on each other. Directors, the technology got it so that you could do more with the camera. You could move around more with the camera, and directors figured, they started playing around with how stories are told, and the idea that the camera can pick up, the camera will immediately know if you're lying. If you are, and if you as an actor check out, like once you make your decision, whatever process you've gone through to create your character, if you lose your focus for even just a moment, and that camera's nice and close on you, it'll pick it up. It'll pick up when your eyes glaze over just for that brief moment when you're like, did I leave the oven on? It'll pick that up. Even if you barely move, it is a weird, creepy thing. The camera will find everything. And so it does mean that whatever your way into these characters is.
And there are countless number of ways to find your motivation, and endless amounts of tools that have been developed throughout the year and different approaches.
And like Brian is saying, all of these tools, are designed to answer that one fundamental question: why?
What's your goal in this situation?
Why is my character doing what my character is doing?
What do they want?
What do they want? And
not
sometimes,
how do they feel? Not that that's not important.
Yeah,
but that's a relatively stagnant thing in acting. Whereas what do you want? Rolling down the track.
How you feel can play is part of what you want. I mean, what you want is affected by how you feel, and
whether or not you get it,
and whether or not you get it
certainly affects how you feel, your feelings.
But it also, and we always talk about my motivation, and we think about it in these grandiose terms when, like you said earlier, Ryan, sometimes your motivation is just, I just want to hang with my friends. Like, I don't want to get kicked out of my cool group here.
It does not have to be lofty all the time. That's true.
And, because look, whether you're doing Hamlet or whether you're doing Guys and Dolls, you are going through that same process of figuring out what does your character want out of this, and the thing is you also, as an actor, you are looking at what does your character want over the course of the entire story. And then you also have, what does my character want in this moment, in this one particular half a scene, in these 6 lines? What is it that my character wants? And then do you get it? No. Okay, well, then you have to, try a different approach to it, or a different tactic. Or then, because sometimes within a scene, as you're breaking down a scene, your character may want one thing, gets it, and then immediately moves on to the next thing that they want, or they want one thing, they don't get it, and then they change and they decide, okay, well, then if I don't get this, then I want this thing over here. And then, so within one scene, you can have multiple things that you have to break down, and it helps you create a character. Because if you do all of these with earnestness,
that feels more believable for sure.
And if you approach, and then it creates. Then you have to ask, who is this? Who is this person? Who is this character that I am tasked to portray? And we get into. So Stanislavski, the Russian Method, there were two actors in New York who were really affected, and they went on to sort of open their own acting schools, and that was Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler. And the influence that the two of them had on a generation of actors it's like a Bill Walsh coaching tree in football. It is just like, it just goes out, and the roots, the tendrils are many and mighty. So that idea of I have to inhabit this character. I have to do everything that this character has done, and I must live my life as this character. That comes from these two in different ways, but they believe in the full immersive, give yourself over to the character of these, James, when you hear these stories of actors like staying in character the entire time that they're on set, and they make people refer to them by their character's name, I should say, that comes from this style of acting. I call the Strasberg method, I call be the ball Danny. It's what you have to be. That's where you also get the trope of, in acting schools where you're like, lay on the ground and believe you're a lizard, and you need to be a purple lizard. What does a purple lizard look like to you? Be the purple lizard. And it's like, and you as an actor have to figure that out and give yourself over and strip. And it's all pretty much meant to strip away any artifice, any judgment that you might have, so that you are trying to feel the emotion of whatever scene, whether it's happy, whether it's sad or rage.
Really feel it. And to do that, I don't know how much the Russians were into this, but the American school of method acting really is, maybe they were a lot. When I say that, I don't mean poo-poo it. I mean, I really don't know. But I know when you go out to New York and you get into one of these conservatories and you really dig deep into this, there's a term. This isn't the only thing, but this is a great one to talk about that demonstrates a big part of what these schools require you to bring a lot of your own trauma and your own trouble and your own feelings to the process. It's called sense memory. And sense memory is basically you remember when you felt that way, and then use that to fuel the emotion in this thing, because it's real feeling that you had, a real experience you went through, and then that reality will come through in this fictional setting. And I really struggle with that part of it. I get emotional when I'm acting, but it seems when I'm doing it that it happens when I'm just following the mechanics of it, that seems to work. Whereas that I seem to trip myself up trying to pull emotions from the past or whatever. I mean, in a basic level, if you have to cry or something, it helps to think of something sad. It's a little more complicated than that, but that actually follows a certain kind of logic. So it's not like I'm against this idea, but sense memory is weird, and there's all these little things you have to go through and work through, the personal object and stuff. There's a whole checklist of them. And but the important part of that, I think, and the thing that endures from that is that that yourself and who you are, in most cases, is going to be a big part of this make-believe person that you put on. And I think there's a lot of ways to bring yourself to something, but you're not just putting on a disguise. And I really do think that's sort of a breakthrough in acting. And it does start with Adler and Strasberg for sure. It's you that's out there. That's what they're going to see. And I think it's important to remember that too, even if you're being a villain, that you're representing that villain. You know what I mean? It's you that's doing that.
It's really, it's crap. I can't remember who was that said it, but they're like, well, what do you think this character looks like? And they go, well, I think it looks kind of like me. Because
it's a good one to trot out at an audition for sure. I was thinking somebody my type.
Yeah. But like when you're in the rehearsal room, you're like, well, who is this person? Well, he's a guy. He's like, in my case, he's like 6'1". He's 200 pounds, and so and and he's got thinning hair, or unless I'm wigged. So it's like it is going to. There are some you can't really. There is going to be an element of you that is going to make it into every part you play, just because you are you. That's part of the point, and it's and it's okay to understand that and even embrace that. It's not something you have to fight against. What ends up happening, and Adler was more the imagine that's they imagine the point in your life where that happened to you, pull that in. There's Strasberg, the being of the character. That's where you get the stories of like De Niro driving a cab around for a month so that he would and just immerse himself in that cab culture and essentially become a cabbie and do everything for Taxi Driver. The famous story from Marathon Man, where Dustin Hoffman walked the streets of New York all night in preparation for the morning shoot, where he had to play, where his character had been walking the streets of New York all night. And Sir Laurence Olivier sees him and he's like, "Well, God, Dustin, you look like hell. Why do you look like hell?" And
to tell the story properly, and I don't mean to interrupt you,
no.
To tell the story properly, he doesn't call him Dustin because he never learned his name.
It's true.
He calls him my dear boy.
My dear boy. He's like, "My dear boy, you look horrible." What? And he's like, "Well, I've been out walking the streets of New York all night in preparation for this scene where I've been walking the streets all night." And he goes, "My dear boy, why don't you just act it?" And so I mean, the idea, the idea behind all of this,
Dustin Hoffman, who denied that for years, finally a few years back said, maybe a lot now, 10 years ago or something, he finally said, actually, a conversation like that very much did happen. I was really, really ragged. It was for other reasons. And when he asked me, I sort of came up with this, well, it's, the acting or whatever, because I'm exhausted, because there was actually all this stuff going on in my life, and I was having relationship problems, and I was just tired all the time. And he goes, and he did say something like that, but he didn't really mean like, "Oh, you're not acting." He just meant, don't torture yourself.
Don't kill you.
Know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's that's how I've always taken it too. Like, not that you're less of an actor. What you're doing isn't acting. It's just you don't have to kill yourself to. I mean, and that's. I will say that is something that I personally, took to heart. It very rarely did I have a part or did I invest so much of myself in a part that I was unable to function outside of my character. It's a job. This is your job, and your job is to do what you need to do to be emotionally available and create the characters.
It's make believe and it's pretend, and we humans are really, really gifted with imaginations, and we really come out of the womb ready to do that. You know what I mean? Like you do it on the playground as a kid. You do it every time you make draw a picture as a kid. Like it's making things up. The best acting you ever do as a person who doesn't study acting at all is when you're lying to somebody else. That's acting. And it's so it's not so getting deep down and studying or like you say, immersing yourself. You can't argue with the results of early De Niro. It's fantastic what shows up on film because of all that effort that goes into really, they say, they had to go for Untouchables. They had to go and find the kind of silk underwear Capone wore, and he wanted to do the whole movie in that, even though it wasn't something anyone was ever going to see. That may sound ludicrous, but if the results are good, you can get away with a lot of that. As Joel said, that's not really being an asshole. That's being a star who's got a little bit of power and who really does want, to the degree that they can, transform into somebody. I sort of see. I haven't heard too many stories about that didn't result in awesome performances, but then maybe that's why we
There is, I mean, there's an element to that, and that the underwear story made me think of it. That is also an approach to acting that kind of, I remember, Gielgud, Sir John Gielgud always would say that there was always a touchstone at some point that was the characters. That once he got that in the rehearsal room, or once he got that on set, he instantly knew what his character was. Whether it was a prop cane, whether it was a particular piece of clothing or something, it's like there was always that. So he always built his character essentially from the outside. There was some article or some prop that allowed him to if my character has something like this, I know exactly who that character is now, and he can start building that character and finding whatever the motivation is.
You want a Gielgud story that proves your point about the camera?
Absolutely.
In Murder on the Orient Express, when they bring him to the cabin where the murder happens, you can literally see on screen him lose his place and the other actor come in and save him. It's in the take in the movie. Gielgud, really, really good. Excellent stage actor, obviously knighted by the Queen, the works. But he worked for a long, long time as an old man because he lived for a long, long time, not being able to really remember anything. The famous story, in fact, as Michael York tells it, was that on stage with another knighted guy, they were playing some Shakespeare thing, and somewhere in there, Gielgud started playing the other character. And just out of politeness, or because he knew the play really well, I can't remember who the other knight was, but he just switched, and they kept playing, and then they sort of got off stage, and they got John back on the train, and then they headed out on stage and did it. So... But so one of the things is the camera catches it. Maybe if you're not looking as an audience member, you don't see it. Once you know that scene goes that way and that he misses a line and gets fixed, and that's some reason a major motion picture just was like, well, that works. Yep. And put it in there because maybe there was something else great about that scene. I don't know. Right. Or that take, or maybe all the other takes were even more disastrous. It's hard to say why that one got in the movie. But Gielgud was acting way into the late 90s, and this is the thing in 77 where his memory was already going. And what's great about that, other than, like I say, the camera catches everything, absolutely catches that. So it's fun to go see how you can't just not notice it. And the other thing that's cool about it, though, is his technique, and he's an extremely technical actor, served him really, really well. Won him an Oscar in 1981 for Arthur. It just kept him busy and kept him doing the thing that he loved, even when there was a lot of the little things of acting that you had to have sort of abandoned him. He's still super effective and stuff. And so it just shows you there's a lot of ways to get there. A lot of people have to help you along the way, but there's a lot of ways to get there. And Gielgud's a good case study in that.
Yeah. So, so that's a particular technique, is to find that external thing that is going to help you understand your character and build your character from the outside in.
Don't let Donald Pleasance eat candy the entire movie. That's right.
But then there's also,
oh, my dear girl, Laurence Olivier says. Yeah. Oh, to Kate Nelligan. Be careful with Donald. He gobbles up screen time. He's what did he call him? A handkerchief actor. And you can watch Pleasance's career. Sometimes he's the lead and he's chill, but sometimes he's just the old guy or the dad or something. And when he's that, he's just always doing something that they have to wait till he's done with before they can edit. This is a long ways from Die Hard, where they're editing on camera moves and all film is changing the way it's made. There's a certain rules to how you used to do stuff. And if somebody's doing this, you have to wait till they're done before you can move on with the show. Right. And nobody knew that better than Donald Pleasance. So it's fun story.
So within the idea of of this building the character from the inside out, this sense memory, the thinking back, the discovering who this person is, and what their history is, what their relationship with their father was, and et cetera, et cetera. That sometimes these are the kinds of questions that you can ask of your character to help you build. Let's talk about that. Building the character and asking those questions. What were their home life? What was their home life like? How did they grow up? Like, did that ever help you? Because I always found that it was like, that's all fine. But when you're in the moment of this particular, in the story, when you're in that moment, you're not, that's...
The play or the script,
yeah.
The script sort of asks you those questions when they're relevant, and then you have to answer them. Yeah, when they're relevant to the action in the scene or whatever. So I don't want to say I don't dig deep or I don't imagine things about the character, but I don't bury myself in this fictional, past. But I do like to think that once I've worked on something for a suitable amount of time, that you can start asking me those questions, and that it's not really I got to go work on this. It's I got the answers for you, baby. Like, I get it. I get this, dude. And they just come naturally. You have to, you don't know what a character's last name is. Well, but you do. You haven't been asked yet, and the play isn't asking you to worry about it. But when asked, hey, we have to address this letter to you. You know what I mean? So I was asked all this, what's your address? What's your everything? And I was like, I just knew. I know all that stuff.
Yeah.
Here, I'll write it down for you.
Yeah.
That's you. So you learn things, I think, intrinsically without having to. And backstory is not nothing. It's important. Like, it is a really useful tool in making somebody come to life. But the most useful part of that for me is where you just have to know, because mostly the piece tells you. And what it doesn't tell you, but you can feel the page asking you, or the scene asking you, you got to figure this out and then just do it. But I said, it is a very real thing. Backstory, what did you do? Blah, blah, blah. The most recent thing I worked at, what did you do during the war? Like, I could answer that question without hesitation, even though I hadn't given it any thought, because because I just was starting to understand that person. I could make that stuff up and own it. And I like being able to do that, but I don't, like you say, you were asked me, do you spend a lot of time doing that? No. And I really do think it comes to you if you're doing the right stuff, doing the right things.
If you have a beat on the character, then yeah. And like we said, it's not always just in drama. I keep coming back to the Guys and Dolls. Why was Benny Southstreet's name Benny Southstreet? And we're like, oh yeah, and so we all were asking ourselves that, like, how did Harry the Horse get his name, and how, why all these guys have, and like and suddenly we realized, I'm like, what I discovered is that in Boston there is actually there's a Bennett and an intersection of Bennett and South Street right in Boston that actually was a little bit of a hotbed of crime. So I'm like, oh yeah, my guy's from Boston. And so that, I'm like, yeah. So like, it was like in amongst all these New York gangsters or whatever, gamblers. This guy's from Boston. And that, so he,
Remember that scene in Gangster #1 where he's talking about Fat Vinny and Skinny Vinny or whatever? I can't remember the thing, but he's like, he's got the little story where it's like, yeah, he actually wasn't fat, but it was because of this, blah, blah, blah. And then when Skinny Pete came along, he was fat. But at that point, it was too late to switch it around. Yeah. You can come up with a story like that for everything. I never thought about it for Guys and Dolls. Like, here,
yeah,
because I think South Street's easy to take advantage. But immediately you started asking those questions, and what would that be? That's part of that isn't something to be ridiculed. It's part of the fun of it, honestly.
So here's a
quizzed on your character. Yeah. Is for me anyway is fun. I think.
So this is so it can also go too far, and let me give you an example of that.
All right,
I was playing in South Pacific again, South Pacific, but I was playing a guy who I was a pilot. I was the airman who had to come in and explain how the Emil Debec, and what was, the battle that was going on and how, what we had to do. And when we were the fighter, the airfare, the air and the fighting and blah, 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 and what the plan was. And for some reason I got it in my head that this guy, because the mission didn't go well, that I was coming in like hot. I was coming in hot under the collar. So I'm like putting these things as I was ordered. And and I'm just delivering this thing. And then, so we get done and Joe Hodge, the director, comes, he goes, this is South Pacific, right? and I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so maybe you can have that little bit of an edge. We're about to sing a song here in just a little bit. and I'm like, point taken.
Gotcha.
I'm like, and I will say, but that was fun to do in the rehearsal room. And he's like, and this is the place to do that. And I'm like, done and done. And then I look back and I look at the other actors on stage looking at me, after I get that note. And, there's like, you just like went all in on this, the mission. I'm like, yeah. So it can go too far. There's, So these acting techniques that's building the character, there are things that kind of became an offshoot of all of that. They again, all of these things serve the purpose of helping the actor find the answer to that question of motivation. And one of them is Sanford Meisner and the Meisner technique, and that is all about repetition. And it's doing something over and over until it kind of goes, it's like sense memory, but it's creating the sense memory. It's doing something over and over and over and over so many times that it becomes instinctual and therefore natural. Yeah. And it will read on, and it will read as natural because you have made it natural. That sort of falls in that, like you have to live the life as the character. I have to be my character off screen as well.
You have to get, and a lot of actors absolutely do follow this, where they just drill the stuff. Robert Downey Jr. is really famous.
Yep, Robert Downey Jr.
Current celebrity who, I don't know if he's Meisner specifically, but he knows everybody's lines. He knows his lines forward and backwards. He can write them out and just writes them out a million times, like just gets to know it so much that when the cameras roll, he can just do whatever. And for him, it will be truthful because there's no there's no grasping for anything. There's no choices in the moment. The choices have all been worked. It's not so much worked out, but without you knowing it, they've all been worked out and you just become the person. It is a tool in getting more truthful. And
you're essentially you're tricking yourself into that truthfulness. That's Yep.
And I will say that's
maybe not
that
tricking.
Specific thing hasn't worked too great for me. There's another William Shatner story that's fun that we have actually told on the show before, but Nicholas Meyer said when he really wanted Shatner to not do something really big, he just made him do it 100 times. And by the 100th time, he'd be so bored with it that he'd just do it naturally. And he kind of knew where that would be. The big one is in Wrath of Khan, where he says the line. To be fair, the line in the script is a kind of a hard one not to give a wink to when you say it, but it's "Here it comes." He says that to Khan when he's about to lower his shields and get back on even playing field with him, and and send this transmission, and he just couldn't get Bill to just hear it. He just was
here. It comes,
and you watched it in the movie. The take it's perfect. Nick is totally right. It came in a good time during the process where he knew that about him, because it really is. There's still a twinkle in Shatner's eye. I don't think you ever rob him of that, or you rob him of what's great about him. But it's fantastic. And I'll just say that no matter what situation repetition is a gift. time is a gift to getting it right. Whether it's your free time, if you got a day job or whatever it is you're doing, the time to go through it, that another time to go through it. There are a lot of directors will say, you know, they don't want it to, you don't want to rehearse it into the ground so that by the time it opens, it's tired or whatever. There is this sort of magic peak at the right moment. Repetition, the time to do it many, many times, the time to really hit the boards when you know that you know it. Yeah, it is awesome. That's a good feeling. That's where acting well with confidence comes from. So I'm not a Meisner guy all the way, but I there's absolute truth in that. Yep.
It's and if you're a kinesthetic learner, if you were a learner by movement, a learner where you learn stuff better when you're kind of on your feet or when you're moving and you're sort of absorbing it through you know that Meisner is a really can be a really effective tool. Because you're getting it into your body, you know, you start associating lines with how your body is moving and where you know how things are happening. And so and then once you sort of have that and have that assimilated into your body, then you can start to play with it and you know it so well that you can start tweaking it, you can start messing around with it, and it all still stays very truthful. You know, and by tweaking it, messing around, I don't mean like changing the words or changing everything. It's just like slight changes in inflection or changes in, you know, how, you know, just, but it gets to a point where you can, where you do know it so well, what you do is truthful. Kind of going back to the Bela, it's the Bela Lugosi school of acting, where it's just these facial expressions, and here's my angry face, and here's my happy face, which also was a big thing in opera too. And there's all these books of you know, it's like here is your facial expressions that you were going to be playing for Don Giovanni, and which. It is great.
It's in opera where the music's really, really hard and technical. You know, it's nice to have a shortcut. Getting the sort of emotions, you know, in there that will still play to the 50th row or whatever.
Right.
So
and
in a way, I don't even it's fun to make fun of Bella in the book. The book is crazy funny. But
it's also. Yeah, it comes from a time when literally you would rehearse a show, you know, the entire ensemble and everybody and all the other principals rehearses the show, and then literally your star arrives that morning because they were just performing at La Scala, and then, you know, whatever, and then they fly in and they're performing and they're like, yes, here's my Don Giovanni. I have, and it's like, this is what this is my Don Giovanni. You guys all have to adjust to me. And because this is my Don Giovanni and it is by the book. And so if you have this by the book character, everybody knows what you're going to do when you come in. And that's why it was really great for the acting world, for the opera world. Chekhov, I can't remember
he's
Chekhov's
Russian
first
too,
name.
Isn't he?
Yeah, he's Russian. What was his first name?
Anton.
And Chekhov had he believed in universal gestures, and so that was a way, and it kind of goes in with the repetition of Meisner, but it is that understanding of body language and what do certain positions of your body, what do certain gestures mean to an audience. It's the difference between it's this versus feeling, versus that. It for the visual person, for everyone except for the 4 people who watch this video version of the podcast, it's the difference between arms crossed. Let me do that again. It's the difference between arms crossed and all closed off to having your hands, resting on your hips and feeling, your chest forward and everything open. It's universal gestures like that. That it's that idea of body language and what that means for what certain gestures and what your body language says about your character and what and how the audience will almost subconsciously learn or react from your character.
When I was in a one act festival in high school, I was at it. I was performing in it, but there with me was Joel's, who taught me a lot about acting and was a really, really great mentor to me in those days when I was just Paul Rudding up the place.
You were that good? You were really, really good. Like
I
Paul
felt
Rudd.
really good about myself and figured that would do the trick. And to some degree it does, as we've discussed before, and we'll discuss a little before we're done here today. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story was we had to all kind of agree on who the best actor was, and they sort of handed out these little accolades for each show or whatever. And I remember I got in a big fight with one of it wasn't really a big fight. I made one of my castmates really mad at me because I was just considering somebody else, and I thought that was weird. The whole weekend was rather odd. But I was like, well, I thought it was this guy. I thought he was the best one on the show. And she said to me, yeah, he was great when he was sitting in the chair. He had to stand up and do something. It was terrible. And I was like, she's kind of right about that. Like, I hadn't thought about that, but that's what's true of me to a certain extent too. You know, you got to play Curly in Oklahoma or something. You got to do it with some panache. You can't just have your hands in your pockets, slouch around like I would do if I was, you know, in the Old West or wherever the hell that thing takes place. The territory.
The
territory. You know, I got the confidence, but to me, it's all inner confidence. No, man, you got to throw your shoulders back and you got to stick your chest out. You got to, and you're not doing these things because it's showy or you're doing them because that's what this guy would do. This is dude from another place, another time, and you got to demonstrate, you know, who you are. We got to see that.
It doesn't.
Oklahoma is not served by having two Judds and the Judd's dead scene. I can promise you. So you got to.
And in body language things made me think of, since you mentioned the genius that is Paul Rudd, made me think of Clueless and the scene where Wallace Shawn, and I can't remember the actress who's playing the other teacher, and they're talking about like, oh, see how they both cross their legs towards each other? That is definite mating behavior and everything. And they're, you know, and if you're playing with your hair, that sort of thing. So that, you know, that's just something that's another layer of things that Chekhov added. Think about Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean and what he does physically with his body and how that informs his character.
And sure, Johnny Depp in really anything.
Johnny Depp. Yeah. I think the most obvious one is
because that guy, you right, exactly. It's defined by the way he stands, by the way he moves, for sure. But you definitely, you know, of course, he's played a lot of quirky people, and the quirkier, the better. And you get to get pretty big with that stuff on screen, and yet there's subtleties within that as well. And it's work. It takes concentration to be. Maybe this is showing what my weakness is as a performer, but it takes concentration to be somebody else physically, much, much more than, for me anyway, mentally. Like, and other people have other tools or other discomfort. I have no problem sort of getting in the head and answering the tough questions, but I got everyone. Eventually, I got to get up out of the chair, and the dude has to still be there. It can't just be me with their words. You know what I mean? And some people learn everything the hard way, but I did eventually learn that and appreciate that.
It makes me, you know, in doing some. Okay, Siri, thank you. In doing some of all of my series are going off at the same time.
Siri's got something to say.
Oh boy. But I mean, you want to, in researching this stuff, the Chekhov and the idea of universal gestures, Helen Hunt came up as someone who really prescribes to Chekhov technique. And I'm like, that would explain literally, if you watch her, how many times, you know, it's like probably like every time, like always at like pinnacle moments, she always does a gesture where she puts her hair behind her ear. And I'm like, oh, that suddenly makes all the sense in the world now, because that is a gesture that clearly means something, and I'm supposed to get something out of that, and from her character, that this was her character, this is her listening, and this is her being engaged, and I'm like, oh, that's a universal gesture thing. There's
a great when Harrison Ford was on Conan O'Brien, Conan and Andy Richter put together a montage of him pointing something he does multiple times in almost every movie. Mm-hmm. And it's something he does as a button, like a wordless thing. He points, and it was, it's a game. To Conan, it's a game to get Harrison on the show and to make him have fun. And he just was sort of always able to do it. This famously curmudgeonly guy who I actually think does have fun doing the interview process and stuff, but Conan just wanted him to have a good time, and that montage that they played for him it's so funny, but it's a useful tool, and it really is, and it shows you that Harrison Ford can't do that too many times. That works, man. That's a trick that works every time. He's got to pull that out, and I absolutely know Helen Hunt's. I totally know that.
The hair behind the ear,
exactly, and that's cool stuff. I sort of dig it.
Real quick tangent sidebar on Harrison Ford. Did you see the clip of because of talking about how somebody who actually secretly is having a lot of fun with this stuff? There was a screening of the new movie. And I'm assuming in LA.
Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Yeah, the Dial of Destiny, the screening of Dial of Destiny, and he was there. Spielberg, Lucas, whatever, and then they're like, and we thought we'd, and they're talking before the screening and blah blah blah, and obviously everyone's going nuts and it's great, and then they go, and we thought it would be really fun to have another little extra treat. And so John Williams and whatever orchestra, Los Angeles Symphony Orchestra or whatever they were at, and he's and then the curtain goes up and there's John Williams and he starts conducting the Indy theme, and as they're leaving, Harrison Ford has just like got this mischievous, like, we got you guys, and he's just like looking back at John Williams because he knows what a badass John Williams is, and the theme, and so it's like Harrison Ford, it's like any thought that you had that he was like, oh, I don't really want to be promoting Indiana Jones again. No, he was having an absolute ball.
No, he's always said that whether he likes it or not, he's always believed it is part of the job. It's a big part of the job to help sell the thing. And he's always hit the trail for every movie that I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. He's always hit the trail hard and done the work of that, even though he can be a little impenetrable. Just because I just think that, that's how he is. But you ask him the right question, They asked him very famously, the clip came out just a couple days ago, the BBC, I want to say, somewhere in England, him and Phoebe Waller-Bridge were doing an interview together, and the guy just said, what do you want? What do you think made this so enduring or whatever? And he answered that they were joking around the whole interview. Like, he didn't ask this question is eloquent thing about how the such subtlety and honesty and the emotion of that story, and that it's that stuff that he's the most proud of in it, because he really thinks that's why the fantastical stuff all feels so meaningful, because the individual emotion's so honest, and then the guy said, well, I just want to say, on behalf of all of us, that thank you. It's been an incredible adventure. Harrison's basically on a victory tour right now. He got to play Han Solo again. He got to play Rick Deckard again. He got to play Indiana Jones again, and what are largely really, really good movies. That's a neat thing to be able to do, because I think he missed although he's got a Lifetime Achievement Award, I think he missed his Oscar moment. I think he regrets that. The Emmy's surely coming, because now that he's doing TV.
Yeah, and
he choked up legitimately, like he was at a loss for words. That really sincere, like a fan telling him how treasured he is and how much they appreciate his contribution. Watch it. gets you. It's really, really cool. So
There was there was a TikTok, and this guy was it was a junket, so he's circling, it's everyone cycling through, and this guy's like, all right, let's play this or that with Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Harrison Ford, and it was like, what is more iconic, the hat or the theme? And they each had, and they're like, oh, the theme. And Harrison's like, yeah. And they're like, Raiders or Last Crusade? And they both were like, oh, Raiders. Yeah. And then he goes, Temple of Doom or Crystal Skull? And Phoebe Waller-Bridge is like, oh, Temple of Doom. And Harrison just like looks at the camera and he goes, Skull.
Hey,
like you gonna debate me on this one? Yeah. But it was very funny. It was just him like clearly like, I know I may be the only one, but I'm saying Crystal Skull.
I'm going with Crystal Skull.
All right, let's get back to, again, we like Shatner. Harrison Ford stories are.
Hey, it's one last one. And sometimes it's as simple as this. And Harrison's approach to work is not simple. He would say it's deceptively simple, but what he does is he focuses on what's important really, really well. There's a story about him when he was just starting out in one of his, not his debut film, but his debut like film, Dead Heat on a Merry-Go-Round, I believe. And he just did Messenger Boy in it. And apparently the director of that film was like, made him do it 3 times. It was like, I'm sorry, kid, you're going nowhere. Let me tell you a little something, and maybe you'll wise up. Once I directed Tony Curtis when he was a young man, about your age, and he was playing a grocery store. And even though he was in this tiny walk-on part just like you, as soon as he came in, I said, hey, there's a star, and I'm not seeing it with you at all. And Harrison said, I thought you were supposed to say, there's a grocery store delivery boy.
Yep.
Whether that's a true story or not, I don't know. That's my favorite Harrison Ford story. I was a 25-year-old like lipping off to the director. Yeah,
well, famously he was a guy who was like, well, if acting works out, great. That's what he wants to do. But he's like, I got other things I can do too that make him happy.
Yeah, maybe. All right. I think he secretly deep down could only be an actor. When you see the choices that he made, they were really, really brave at the time.
So
I mean, he turned down Rob Reiner's role in All in the Family, and he didn't do it because he didn't need the work. He did it because he'd just done Love American Style and Gunsmoke and a couple other things, and he thought the show would be a hit, and he didn't want to be trapped and always known as this one kind of character and this one kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so he turned down what he really thought was going to be could have been a star-making and money-making thing, which it was.
Yeah.
And he did it because he saw bigger other things for himself than that. He didn't want to get trapped.
Hey, that's look, Rob Reiner has made some of the most beloved films in modern movies, and every day someone still calls him Meathead. So those are the predominant acting style, techniques and how actors built characters, and obviously, like anybody, you steal little parts from this and you go over here and you steal this part and you make it a buffet. It's a hodgepodge, and you pick whatever is gonna what works for you, and then you get into as theater becomes a little bit more experimental, or I should not experimental, but some styles start to change a little bit as authors are coming up with they're experimenting with their voices a little bit. You get David Mamet and William H. Macy
and Joe Mantegna, and basically the whole Chicago cabal. John Malkovich, Gary Sinise.
I want to say, that's not the Atlantic Theater.
Those guys, the guys I just named is Steppenwolf Theater. That's not necessarily Mamet though, but there's definitely it's not only in Chicago, but it's definitely a Chicago thing. Where it's like, just, hey, if the play is good, and if it's bad, you shouldn't be doing it. If it's good, just say this stuff and it'll work. It's let go of all this hand wringing and making things up. If if where your character grew up was important, it'd be in the play.
Yeah.
So it's not important. So don't spend any of your time. That is still not to say that there's not craft in the work when you read Mamet's take on acting,
Right.
but Mamet didn't want you getting bogged down. He didn't want you to lose the rhythm of the thing or the character of the piece itself. And nobody writes in rhythm better than David Mamet. So, so he has a bit of a point, but I've always thought and there's the foreword I remember to that book, or at least the version I had, that he co-wrote with his students at the time, was by Alec Baldwin. And at the end of it, Alec had this total Alec Baldwin-ism where he was like, I fundamentally was very famously quite method, at least in his early career. I completely disagree with everything David Mamet has to say, but you must read this book. Mr. Mamet is a genius. So you can play your little cue now if you want.
Acting! Brilliant!
Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah.
I'm like, nice. Good job,
Yeah.
Alec.
So they called that the practical aesthetics method.
That's a great name for it.
Yeah. I will say, I called it Act You. But I mean, it is basically, it is like Ryan said, it's getting out, just get out of the way of the words. The author has done all of the hard work for you. It's there in the page. So take it, have a literal understanding of the scene and know what the character wants, and then figure out on the stage,
and stand up straight and speak the lines so that they can be clearly heard.
Yep.
And you bravo, sir, is basically the thing.
And they talk about the essential action tactics that the character can do at the moment, but then and that's not new tactic. Oh, what can the actor do now to try to get what they want? And it's like, but no, it's tactics that the character can do at the moment with the information they have. So it's not, it has to do with, okay, what do what does your character know? Don't play the end of this of the play. Don't play, you don't play, what you grew up as doesn't, like you said, if it was important where you grew up, it'd be in here. It's what information do you have, and how does that, and you figure it out, and then it's like, oh, as if. So it's like, now you need to think about something that happened in your life, as if, so that you can go, well, it's as if you like your dad left or something like that. The betrayal you feel is as if that time that you fell in the well or something like that.
Although I couldn't name it when I was in school and part of academia, I was big time proponent of this particular technique in the school of acting. And I had a really good director, my favorite director, in fact, who, when I posed that question, well, what does the character even know? I can't sit here and play what I know. I have to, that doesn't, I mean, I have to, I just find it difficult to rectify that. How do I learn all this stuff about somebody that they don't even really know about themselves and still be truthful? That's complicated. And the director said to me, and this is a great note, well, there's what your character knows, and there's what your character knows they know. And it's your job to keep track of both of those things. It's still you up there. You know what I mean? Like that. And I was like, that sort of opened things up where I could maintain the tools of this approach, which I find really, really useful. I do. It's more part of the stew now, as you say. It's more of the part of the hodgepodge. Yeah. But that little thing was like, I was like, wow, that's all right. I mean, that because there is truth to that. The character does know things about themselves. They just don't know they know those things. And it let me have my cake and eat it too, in terms of preparation and stuff, in what I thought was a great way. And it's still one of the coolest things I ask about any given character in any given.
Can you say who that director was?
You know who the director was. I've only
don't.
done shows for this particular director for the last few decades. So.
Okay, no, so this wasn't like college or anything.
Nope.
So no, okay, then I know.
And not only that, I can't even, although I haven't named him, I can't even give a friend of the show. I don't even know that he coined the phrase. All I know was it's just a great, it's a thing of the where if you've done all this and you've studied all this stuff and you've done the Meisner, and I mean, you're as an actor in academia, it's certainly your responsibility to try all this stuff out and to not be cynical about any of it. What's the worst that can happen? You just end up lying on the ground thinking about being a lizard. You take a little nap. But what's not going to happen is there's no chance you get anything out of anything if you just have made up your mind that you won't from the beginning.
Right.
So I've always been like, yeah, I'll try anything. I mean, sounds like BS to me, but I will try anything. Let me give it an honest try at least. And this was part of that, where it was like, if I really think that's a good philosophy, I had to go down that path. And that's why what you were saying seemed, and what Mamet is saying, frankly, I think leads really nicely.
And what you just said, I think this is a good way to cap this discussion. I'm sorry, I accidentally hit my button here. Hey everybody, I'm going to do a workout apparently. Nice. So I don't know if those beeps picked up. But what you said about your job in academia is to try all of these things without cynicism.
I think in any walk of life, but I think especially in school, I can't speak to film, but I can definitely speak to theater. Joel's talked about what it means to be a theater professional, and I think there are plenty of places in the show where you can hear him basically nail it. It more than anything else, all this stuff's the fun stuff, creating things and stuff. The acting's the fun part. Acting the same thing 62 times in 30 days or whatever takes professionalism.
That's the job. Yeah, that's where it becomes the job. Yeah.
And that's no BS, because I'm not particularly great at that part of the job. I'll have to admit, I get bored really, really easily. It's part of why there's not a lot of professional acting in my life. It's mostly volunteer and hobby acting. Yep. But I will say this for academia, for high schools, for whatever, for one-act festivals and for colleges, that's where the theater is happening in the nation. It's where it still happens all the time. Theater is a tough thing. It's great when you live in a town with a ton of theater. It's great when you've got one of the most prestigious, regional theaters as at your disposal, where you can go and see stuff, or where you can work if you're blessed and you work hard and you're talented. But travel in the country, you see where the theater's happening, where they're putting on the plays. It really is in education, and I do think although that professional aspect of it is lacking there, understandably, I still like that. I like the arts in education, and I like that when every theater in America closes, I still really think the colleges and the high schools and stuff still gonna keep doing it, and that's where it really, really lives. So So when I talk about academia, I'm talking about we've talked about it on this show. Dana, that when we guested on her show, she made a big point out of it. What a theater degree gets you, other than a lifetime in the theater. Hey, maybe it'll get you that. And if so, great. It's a good path to get to that, to actually have an education. But it can get you so many other things. And so I don't know how that fits with acting so much. I guess that's a tangent.
Yeah. But and academia, the colleges and universities. And then there's also, your continuing education as an actor, continuing to take acting classes and continuing to train and work and try to get better,
or just read or listen and learn from others that you're working with. All that stuff is part of it.
And this is where Melissa McCarthy said, and we were watching her on Hot Ones, where they eat the hot wings, and she was very funny on it. But she was talking about in one of her acting classes, and she said the teacher's name, and I can't remember the name, but she had said, he's like, in here, when you come into the class, you need to take off all of your armor. You need to strip all that armor away. And then he's like, however, I will not ever let you leave this place without putting that armor back on. And to what you said, when you're in academia, when you're in a classroom, when you're in that place of training, yeah, you gotta strip all that judgment away and just try and fail, and then try again and fail again, and then. But I liked when he, the important part to me is at the end, when you're done with the training, you still need to be able to go and exist in the outside world. And I don't think that is something that is taught enough, that, to acting students, is that, when you're done acting, it's okay to be done. And when you go out in the world, you don't need to still be on. And that this is a craft. This is it can be art, but it's still something that you have to exist. You have to exist in this world. So I feel that that's a decent place to end this discussion of acting and acting styles in film. And what does it all mean? Yeah, I don't know. And it doesn't mean a whole hill of beans in this world. If the actor that you like makes you feel something and takes you along on a journey and helps and tells you a story, then they've done their job. And clearly, whatever technique they employ, it must have worked a little bit.
Well, it's weird. Acting something everybody feels they can have an opinion on, and of course they can. But it is something that a lot of people have really strong opinions about it. Don't really know much about what it is beneath the surface. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there is a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. I don't know. It's why,
a lot of reality, the uptick in reality television in the 2000s, and also have a lot of those people thought they were going to go on and have careers in front of the camera, get into movies. A couple of them have, but most of them did not. That's why a lot of actors a lot of athletes, after they retire, they're like, well, I'm good looking and I'm ripped and people say I'm funny. So the guys in the locker room thought I was funny. So I'm going to go be on television and be on shows, and they'll go on for a while, but then their shtick will wear really thin if you don't start, if you don't pay attention to some of the stuff that we talked about and learn how to, you can't go just being, well, I'm approaching this acting. You hear athletes like, oh no, acting's a lot like running a football play. I'm told to come through the door over here and stop at this point and then walk back over here and say this line. And it's like,
that is a big part of it.
That is a big part of it.
Well, hitting your mark with some consistency is no small thing.
Yeah. Well, that's
very famously, Crispin Glover can't do that.
Yeah. Well, and that's something we didn't talk about.
Go to a spot on the floor. He can't do it. He admits he can't do it.
Yeah.
That's been a challenge for him as an actor. He's got to be a really unique character to still be in demand for anything. And there are certain things that Hollywood could never use him for because he just can't do that basic thing. And I admit not everybody can. Maybe the athletes are good at that.
Yeah, and that's something we didn't talk about when we were talking about all of this character technique and all of this work that you do to immerse yourself in the life of this character and be one with the character. If you're not lit, if you're out of focus because you walked too far into the room, if you do all of this stuff, then none of that character work matters. And so you still have to have the presence of mind. This is why full immersion character acting to me makes no sense, because you still have to have the presence of mind to go, did I hit the mark that the director needed me to hit? Did I accidentally look down the barrel of the camera?
Being able to fully immerse yourself. Like the best example in the modern era is Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis, yeah.
And Daniel Day-Lewis is as good an actor as there's ever been. So but it's still, he's a big star. He's the star of every movie he was in for almost 3 decades. Like, it's a privilege to be able to do that, to be able to be called Mr. Lincoln the entire process. You know, that's not, every actor can't come to the party with that. And I'll give an example. But it's hard to argue with what Day-Lewis has put on the screen, because it's stunning. So it just shows you that the immersion works. It absolutely does. You know, the guy who played the butler or the waiter, he can't be doing that stuff. So it really is a thing where when you're the star, we'll all get on board.
Number 1, maybe 2 and 3 on the call sheet.
I'll tell you a story about what's his name on Succession. Is it Strong? What's his first name?
Oh, Jeremy Strong.
Jeremy Strong, really famous, immersive performer. And he's working in an ensemble where it's kind of fun. Succession is a really great, you can spot each kind of acting technique amongst the principal characters. It's really, really interesting in that way. At least that's one of the things I find interesting. I find Succession somewhat overrated. But not to trot that term out, but Jeremy Strong is really, really immersive actor. He's as a result, we talked and ripped on Joaquin Phoenix and joked about him a little bit. He's another one. He's unpredictable in that way. He really does, regardless of what is required, he sort of follows his heart or his instincts and does that thing on screen. And I think Jeremy's a wonderful actor. Like, I really enjoy watching him. I think he's fascinating on screen, in fact. So I wouldn't take that from him. He had to go through this whole thing where he did this article where he's granting access and trying to promote the show. And the article came out and basically kind of
I remember
focused exclusively on what a wanker he was and not really anything else. And it just shows you that the way you write something or what you choose to be interested in, you know, context really, really matters. Or when you're acting, the given circumstances really, really matter. And then he had Brian Cox off there telling him that he's insane and stupid. And then, I didn't mean he's insane and stupid. But then the next interview, God, he's just crazy and a pain in the ass. That didn't help. Whatever, you know, Brian Cox is going to say what he's going to say. That's part of the joy of him. But it's sad. It's sad that became the story, and that this guy who's part of this big hit show that does do things a little bit differently. I found it. I don't find myself empathizing with method actors when they do something weird or crazy very much. I feel like, oh God, here we go. For him, I really felt something, and I'm not sure why it is. I'm not sure why that is. You know, he's the guy who won the Emmy. Another guy I'm a big fan of, Matthew McFadden. Very, very technical actor. Really, really technical actor. And to kind of, now I don't want to say that he doesn't feel stuff, but I mean, really kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, and was really rewarded greatly for it on the show. He's brilliant on it. But I don't want to leave here going, what Joel says is right. You know, I don't remember the actor that said it, but you quoted him before on the show, and this is the best thing I've heard about the method experience when you're on set with a star of some kind is, you know, you only ever hear about it when they're playing a jerk and they act like a jerk to everybody. You rarely ever hear the story of the immersive method movie star playing a kind, wonderful Mr. Rogers type character and being super nice to everybody when otherwise they might not do that. So it is, on that level, on that movie star level, it is sort of a hall pass to act out amongst people and just let your ego be the thing that drives you. I get that, but I also know there's a lot of really interesting artists really putting interesting things up on the screen who really, really do immerse themselves in character. And I know for a fact that has provided us with a whole nother level of like emotional availability and empathy on screen. I'm certain of that. Having watched people who don't really care what they're doing kind of waltz through stuff, and there's places where that actually works pretty good, or where you see people who really like the fascinating one we talked about him earlier is Bob Odenkirk, who's now he's as good an actor as I've ever seen, and I think he cares about acting, but I think I think he embraced the fact that he was coming to it from a different kind of place, and that place still had value. And so I think we honestly can say with him that we got something. With comedy, we got the classics, the greatest hits, the willingness to be absurd, the willingness to really trot just about anything you could imagine out there and commit to it.
Yeah.
And that, but that's, he didn't create that. He just sort of mastered it.
Yeah.
What we've seen from him as a dramatic actor, there was some, I really believe we sort of haven't really seen before, or we've seen it from other comedic actors sort of trip into it in a sort of masterful way. And it is a completely different kind of thing. You know, when they were getting ready to do that show, the Breaking Bad prequel,
Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul, one of the things the two leads did, I can't remember her name either. She's brilliant too, in a kind of totally different way. And there is how women and men approach acting. It's not a sexual thing, but there is a different way. I think that as animals on the planet, we access emotions and things like it. So there really is different methods that, you know, I should say that too. But they did a thing where they just hung out. She came over to his house or whatever, and they just hung out for a weekend. And by the end of the weekend, they just weren't even talking to each other. Not because they weren't getting along, but because they just sort of ran out of ways to pretend that they were domesticated and they didn't have anything to say. Yeah. And both of them, the thought occurred while they were doing this. Well, this is actually what it's like. Like, this is working. If this was somebody I had to keep entertained or keep engaged, you know what I mean? Like, professionally in this moment, I don't think it would be as honest as this. Us just being here, seeing it to the end of our proposed deadline, but doing it, whatever, like blowing the rest, not blowing it off, but just content to be quiet with somebody else. And they both, in an interview, discovered that each of them had the same thought, essentially, while they were doing it. And that's how that was some weird, unconventional way that sort of thing is, those sorts of anecdotes and all those different approaches, that's what's so fun about them. So even the ones that I kind of don't see a lot of wisdom in, I don't want to send them out. Should be easy enough. It should be easy enough to not be an asshole. Even if like Day-Lewis, if you're the title character and you're the big movie star and you're in literally every scene in the 3-hour movie or whatever, your process is important. And I think we should all gather around and honor it. Right. At the same time, don't be an asshole about it, which there are many reports about him being a dick, or there's reports about him doing weird stuff. Yeah. But not just being mean to people for its own sake. Yeah. I would hate to see. I mean, it's not political correctness. That's not it at all. But there's a new awakening to how people treat each other and what a kind of rough and almost abusive place the halls of power can be in. That's as true for Hollywood as it's about any place anyone's ever been. And that doesn't mean that we look back on Daryl Zanuck's movies and condemn all of them because he did something awful, or Kevin Spacey movies, or whoever you want to go at. But, I don't think you do that. I think you honor that. That's good. That's what Me Too and other things have brought about. And I think we could have the potential to really live in a better world because of that. But I do still hope that people are willing to put themselves out on the limb, because that, to me, that is where the magic happens. I think if you really, and movies have the resources to let you do that. So I'd say go, whereas not every project that you're involved in does. Not every pilot in South Pacific is going to be allowed to, hit the ground running.
I have.
South Pacific, right? That's so funny. I mean, obviously there's trust between you guys, or he would.
I mean, Joe. Yeah,
he would never said anything like that could potentially hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah, he's like, this is a.
We're about to sing a song here, right? I mean, That said, how much more interesting was that guy that you went as far probably as was beyond what was probably appropriate intensity for the scene, and you if you travel there, then dialing that back and still having it be in there someplace. Like I talked about when a director knocks your dominoes down that you've set up so carefully, and they knock them all down, and he's just like, I don't know how to do anything. I can't move. I can't get out of the chair. The way to do it is, first of all, just shut up and do what they're asking. Try that first, and then you'll find maybe that's a useful domino. Maybe those things you'll never find out if they can work together if you don't try stuff.
Yeah, and again, you do it. Yeah, you comes to a point where you have to have a.
Who was Dustin Hoffman playing in that play? Tolstoy or something?
Yeah,
somebody,
like
some famous person on their deathbed. You want me to get up
and walk to the chair?
It's a great scene because it tells us who this guy is in a fantastic moment. But and what does Sidney Pollack say later? Because Tolstoy can't talk when he's walking or walk when he's talking is craziness or whatever. This is fantastic. Die when he's walking or walk when he's dying. Nobody will work with you.
Yeah.
And that guy, as Joel pointed out when we talked about Tootsie back in our third 1982 episode, that guy's a dick.
Yeah.
He knows a lot about acting. He mentors people, I think, in a useful way, but he's still in the ways that matter. Maybe he grows up over the course of the movie. The movie ends before we can be sure of that. We know he's learned a lesson because he's expressed it. We haven't seen it in action, but he's a jerk. He's a jerk actor. He's a pain in the ass. Man, you're dressed up like a tomato, man. Just hit your mark and sway back and forth. What the hell's the matter with you? It takes all kinds.
Yep.
And acting and actors, and it's just even true for big movie stars and great big movies. They're at the mercy of a lot of stuff. So take it easy on them too, is the other thing that I would say. There's some I don't like, but mostly I really try to get, hey, you were hired for this. Hollywood likes to put you in a pigeonhole, and not everybody's brave enough to turn that stuff down like Harrison did back in the early 70s. You take the work and you do the best you can sometimes. Yep. That's what it's like for the vast majority of people.
Going back to Bob Odenkirk, I made a departure from what I usually read to wind down my days, and I'm reading his biography that he wrote. So I'm really excited to sort of follow this story of him as someone who devoured, and I could recite almost every episode of Mr. Show, and so many of his other things in the comedy world, and then seeing him evolve into the actor that he is. I'm really excited to read this. So that's a little bit different. So that is going to do it for this episode.
Hopefully it was somewhat instructive and fun. I tried to fill it with as many anecdotes.
And you know what? And again, like we said, ultimately all of this is just is just in service to try to tell a story. But we thought you might be curious as to what are some of the
telling stories bring us closer to each other. The most important tool you have as an actor and a director and a writer and an audience member is empathy. God gave you the ability to imagine, and when you use that imagination to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, whether it's a character, whether it's your neighbor that you're fighting over the landscaping with, or whoever it is, that you try and see things from their perspective, that's how we all evolve, man. That's the path to Valhalla. That's the true way. I believe that to the core of my being. So
that's where we're going to end it.
Don't forget empathy.
Correct.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.